That's a good grab by Jack Hannaf. Certainly a backup player, that's for sure, and he may well be required. He's one of 12 Fremantle Dockers out there today with less than 20 games of experience. Well done by the young man in front, Crichton. He fisted away, down to Lachie Neale. Pavlich with a couple to beat, and he beats them. In the list of AFL goal scorers, quite remarkable, and Buddy only a couple in front of him thanks to his couple last night. Pavlich, he goes back and he does kick it.
Hello and welcome to episode 17 of the Freo Big Footy Podcast. We're moving into the finals this week with the game against Geelong coming up. We'll have a very brief look at the game last week against St Kilda. We'll have a look at team selections and obviously a little bit of an in-depth game preview of the game against Geelong. We'll have a brief look at the AFL MVP candidates Fremantle have had, with 3 guys being named, as well as the 5 All-Australian candidates. And as a special treat this week for Fremantle getting into the finals, we've got a ex-Docker Life member joining us this week. So listen in and hopefully you enjoy it. All right, last week Fremantle played St Kilda with a very depleted side, with 10 changes named on Thursday and then a further 2 changes with Mayne and Ibbotson both ruled out before the game. And St Kilda romped away to a pretty comfortable victory in the end, 16 goals 16, 112 to 6 goals 541, with Fremantle really only giving a yelp in the second quarter for a brief period there. And obviously probably the biggest news out of the game was the injury to Clancy Pearce, which was disappointing for not only Fremantle for the rest of the season where he seems to be out, but also for our defence against Geelong this week. Seppo, you're obviously at the game. What did you think of it?
It was an interesting game, being there and obviously not being concerned about the result too much. And it was great to see Moller and Simpson get their chance. Unfortunately about Clancy going down so early, but it gave Moller a good taste of it getting a full game. And it was great to see Simpson just show little glimpses of what everyone's been talking about in the forum and what they've seen him do for, down on the track and everything. It was great to see it. The result didn't concern me too much, knowing that there was 9 or 10 other senior players getting some good rest. So it was interesting, and the way that Ross Lyon sort of acknowledged and congratulated the retiring Saints players made the game feel like a testimonial game almost, that there was nothing riding on it, and it was actually quite enjoyable from a Freo fan point of view, knowing that we were in the finals and Saints weren't.
Yeah, I thought it was a pretty good touch at the end with Ross Lyon going out obviously to the 3 retirees, and congratulations to those guys on their career, regardless of whether you like them or dislike them. Anytime you get to the amount of games around that 200 mark that Milne, Blake and Cozzy did, you've always got to acknowledge that it's a pretty good career considering that most players sort of only stay in the system for 2 to 3 years. So congratulations to all of them, and good luck in their retirement. And obviously for us it's on to bigger and better things. So I do agree with you about Simpson. I thought he did show a little bit last week, and obviously probably for him more importantly the amount of work he's got to run defensively in terms of tracking his player back. He's very good at running forward, and he obviously got a bit of stage fright in the first kick for goal where he just sort of missed everything, but his second shot was much better and probably more what we're used to. So
he even showed a bit of Roger Hayden about him, where he danced between 2 or 3 players and just waited to give off that perfect handball. So it looks like he's got a bit of that poise about him when he's got this. I'm not sure if it was deer in the headlights, or I'd like to think of it, he's got a bit of a skill and class. So it'll be great to see what work he can do. And obviously a lot of the other younger guys got a lot of taste of what it takes to be at that high level. And you could see that the fitness was a big issue, and how hard they have to run for a lot of those guys that's just not used to step up from waffle to AFL level.
It was interesting probably to see Ross Lyon leave Crowley off the chain a little bit so he could go through and literally just have a day out without having to tag anyone, and he ended up racking up a game-high 28 possessions.
Yeah, it was a very loose, well, you can't even really call it a tag or a job. So 47 possessions for, was it Montagno and is it Stevens that got that real free run at it through the middle. But obviously for him, it was obviously just getting touch out there and avoiding injury, really. But one job that I thought actually went really well, actually 2 jobs, it was Silvani on Rewalt and Crichton on Milne, I thought were 2 very good matchups. And I think Rewalt kicked 1 goal. I think Milne had 2, but those 2 goals, none of them were actually kicked on Crichton. Both of those guys actually did a really solid job. Obviously, Silvani's held his spot over in the team, and Crichton has travelled with the team. It shows that there's a bit of light out of that game. We actually did get something out of it to show that these guys are handy defenders.
Yeah, I mean, Rirolt did it. I think he did kick 2 goals in the end, but you're right. Silvani probably showed the match committee that he's up to the task, and particularly with the amount of ball that was going in there. I mean, as you said, Montagna and Stephen, those guys were racking him up, and I think they nearly probably had, probably 6 or 7 guys get over 30 possessions, with Montagna and Stephen getting 47 each. Probably drove a few fantasy players a bit nuts, with Montagna racking up 189 points. But other than that, wasn't probably a lot else to take from the game. I thought Sutcliffe was once again pretty good down back, and I think it was probably pretty an inspired move by the match committee over the last 2 to 3 weeks, playing him down back, probably looking at Geelong when they've got the likes of Motlop and Christensen and Stokes, that I think he actually does have that pace to play down there. And I think when we get to the Geelong game, I think he'll be a crucial player this weekend, trying to contain those smaller forwards that Geelong has. All right, obviously we'll move on from that game and we'll put it in the memory bank. So it does probably take us back to the dark old days of when we used to see Fremantle probably put that up as our best effort. So
yeah, that's true. It's nice to know that that wasn't our best 22 out there performing, and yeah, it was comforting to know that that's not what we serve up every week.
Absolutely. So going to team selections this week, Geelong obviously going with a pretty settled lineup, with just Nathan Vardy coming in for Trent West, who's been omitted, and Paul Chapman playing his 250th game. So terrific effort by him, who's sort of had a pretty injury-interrupted year. Where for Fremantle, 10 ins this week with Hayden Ballantyne, Nick Subin, Stephen Hill, Zach Clark, David Mundy, Michael Walters, Lee Spur, Chris Mayne, Nathan Fife, and Zach Dawson in. While the outs are Jesse Crichton, omitted, Hayden Crozier, omitted, Josh Mellington, omitted, Joshua Simpson, omitted, Clancy Pearce, out with an Achilles, Alex Forster, out with a back, Craig Moller, omitted, Taverner, omitted, Peter Fawkes, omitted, Jack Hanneth, omitted. And out of all those selections, probably the disappointing one out of all of it was Michael Johnson, once again doing another lower leg injury. And I think it's probably a concern to the club that in the last probably 5 to 6 weeks, we've had probably too many lower leg injuries in terms of either calves or Achilles, and he'll be a big loss this week. McFarlane also being named as an emergency, but he did travel over, so you'd have to think if he does pass training, he'll be a late inclusion.
It's interesting to see they actually didn't name him. I'm not sure if they're just trying to play mind games at the Geelong selection table, but interesting to see if they give him a chance and put him in there and pull him out if he doesn't make it, or what the benefit of actually naming a team and then adding him into it. And looking at the team now, it'd be interesting to see if he does come in, who actually comes out. And the way we've named our backline, is it going to be Silvani, or do we need more than just Dawson, McFarlane? Do we need Silvani in there as a third to replace the Johnson role? Or it'll be interesting to see what happens if there is a late change in Luke McFarlane, because looking at the video of Chris Bond and naming the team, it sounded pretty confident they want McFarlane to play. So it'll be interesting to see how we actually treat him tomorrow if he does come in.
I think, yeah, it'll depend on the matchups as well, I assume, because Tom Hawkins obviously will play, or if he does play, and they've got Hawkins and Podsy Adley down in the forward line, but they've really only got 2 big talls. So it'd be interesting to see how they use that. So Dawson will probably take Pods, you would have to think, and then obviously Silvani, whether they put Silvani on Hawkins, and I don't know if Silvani's that good as the loose player, so it'll be interesting to see how they go with that. The other interesting selection was probably Hayden Hanneth as an emergency. I know Crichton went over on the flight, so it'll be interesting to see whether maybe he is a late call-up or a late inclusion, depending on how the matchups go.
Yeah, I suppose it's interesting they've gone with that one extra on top of the emergency. So I think Crichton's the only one that's actually flown over that's not listed as the emergency. I don't think there's anyone else there from that list. I'm sure if Crozier's... Yeah, so you got Hanneth and Crozier there. Obviously, Luke McFarlane might come in for someone, but it'll be interesting to see. Hanneth's there, obviously, to back up Sandilands or Clark if they don't pull up as a backup ruckman. And Crozier's an interesting one to see if there's any other guys out there with a doubt. It's probably Walters, who had that little knock of the knee. He's cover for him, and it would be nice to have Crichton in there, because if we do lose another important defender like Duffield or Spur, we're really going to need him in there. So it'll be interesting to see what type of changes we're going to make, and if any are going to be based on the weather. And at the moment, it's looking like it might shower during midday Saturday.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think the weather will probably bother Fremantle or Geelong really that much. But we'll probably break it down into the three sections, main sections on the ground. And then we'll have a look. So we'll start at the back line for Fremantle. Obviously, we've got in the name side is Spur, Sutcliffe, Silvani, Dawson, Pearce, and Duffield. So I think obviously Mzungu's been named on the wing, but I would more than likely wouldn't be surprised if Mzungu plays in that back six, and obviously Pearce will go up onto the wing against the likes of Tom Hawkins, Podsy Adderley. Selwood's been named on the half-forward flank, but probably you would think that he may swap with Christensen, Josh Caddy, Paul Chapman, and Stephen Motlop, who's probably in all-Australian form in the last 6 weeks, who's a really dangerous forward down there and obviously can get off the leash. So it'd be interesting to see which player they decide to run with Motlop. What do you think, Seppo? How do you think the matchups will go?
Well, obviously the talls are going to be easily matched up, and I suppose we can compete really well there. Last time we played Geelong, it was Christensen, Motlop, and I think there was one other that really got off the chain. It was their smalls that really hurt us, and it would be interesting how Lee Spur, and I remember he was a late out last time, so it'll be crucial, these smalls and how fast they move and how quick their ball movements can be, how we actually treat the tags, and if it's going to go a long way to winning the game, because I don't see Podsy and Hawkins the dangerous forwards that they have been in the past, and if Geelong are going to kick a winning score against us, it's going to come from those smalls. So yeah, it's really going to define the game, and obviously stopping the ball getting in there starts in the midfield, but if it does get in there, that's how Geelong's going to want it in the hands of guys like that, Chapman, Motlop scoring.
Oh yeah, I think they'll probably go with Spur on Chapman if Chapman plays down there. Spur's probably got the better body strength. I don't think Sutcliffe or Duffield really probably have the body strength. The other one would be Mzungu. I think Mzungu would be a great matchup down there for Chapman. He's got the height on him. He's also got the body strength to do that. So I wouldn't be surprised at all if Mzungu gets that matchup. I reckon they'll probably put Sutcliffe on Motlop. I think Sutcliffe has got the agility and he can sort of play that lockdown role. I really think it's going to be important for Fremantle as well, having whoever does play on Hawkins, and you'd have to think it's going to be McFarlane if he plays, to be able to run off Hawkins, obviously with his back, having that extra ability to run out of defence and make Hawkins chase and chase and chase all the time will be really crucial, I think, for Fremantle to help get that ball out of defence. Obviously, in the third quarter, in the last game we played down there, we were pretty woeful at getting the ball out of defence. But in saying that, I do think we did have a lot of our prime movers out in that game. As you said, Spur was a late withdrawal. I don't think Duffield played in that game either.
He was hurt. I think he was subbed off.
Yeah, he was subbed off
in the first or second quarter. So we were lacking a lot of the smaller defenders. I remember Johnson copped a knock in that game as well. I think that's where his calf injury actually first started in round 14, and he's had it bandaged up quite a bit since. But I remember there was no Spur, Duffield off, subbed in the first or second, and then we lost Johnson. So a lot of that great defensive setup we've had all year was taken out that game. If we can add McFarlane to this back line and create that general defence we've had, it's going to go a long way to winning the game. And the interesting thing is, obviously, when we burnt the ball last time, was we had no forward structure forward of the ball, and with Pavlich fit and Main and Clark right there, we're going to actually have forwards to lead onto, and kicking the ball over the top with Walters and Ballantyne running onto it. It's going to be a lot more better than it was last time we were down there.
Yeah, absolutely. Any other points you want to make about the backline versus the Geelong forwards, or we'll move on from there?
No, well, the only other thing I picked up through the midfield is how much of dominance we might have, and I know it doesn't usually play a lot in games now, but the advantage we're going to have in the ruck with Sandlands and Clark over Vardy and who else? Lickarves, yeah. It's going to be really, hopefully, a clean day, and we can actually make the most of it, because it's something, if we can start to win those centre clearances, and Zach Clark's just been dominating, and I'll almost say now that he's the number one ruckman, and if he's in that midfield and pushing the ball out to our A-grade on ballers that we have, which we didn't have last time, once again, we've got Fife, Mundy, Barlow, Crowley, all in there. It's going to be great to be able to get first use, and hopefully this ruck advantage will help us.
It'd be interesting to see how Geelong set up in that regard as well, whether they just concede in the ruck a little bit and try to sort of sharp out tap.
Yeah, it's happened before.
It has happened before, and in the past, we've probably only had one option in there, where now it's a little bit different when we've got Barlow, Mundy, Crowley, Fife. We can go to any of those guys with confidence. So in the past, I think we really only had sort of probably Mundy in there, who was you could confidently think may get a clearance, where now we've actually got a much better mix in terms of guys we could go to in that centre clearances. So it'll be interesting
And
to
one
see.
name we actually need to add, and I must stress this because the last few weeks is Lockie Neal. Because if you look at the work he's done in stoppages, not just the centre bounces, but in the forward line, he's been crucial to a couple of our scoring shots or even score assist. He's vital at the bottom of that pack now. So that's another one that we've got to add to this group that we're going to have, being able to read that ball and be an option once that ball comes down off Sandilands or Clark.
The other probably person who's going to be forward that we haven't really touched on either at this point, and even though he's been named on the centre, is probably Stevie Johnson. He hasn't played the last two games against Fremantle through suspension, so and he just adds a lot of creativity there. So it does require someone to be a dedicated player on him. It'll be interesting to see which matchup Ross Lyon thinks will be the best player for that. So because he's going to be crucial to Geelong's ability to kick scores and create. Who do you think will get the job there?
Well, it's interesting because I was looking at matchups before, and you'd think that Crowley would go to Selwood, but with the option of moving him mid-game if someone else gets off, because De Boer would be applied on Bartel, who they've been using very loose as that sort of backman who can run it out. So really got to have De Boer and Bartel. The other midfield matchups all really should go head-to-head against the likes of Kelly and Corey and Duncan and the other guys in there. So Johnson really could switch between either Crowley or just head-to-head against Barlow or Mundy or whoever's in the midfield.
It's interesting they've brought Taylor Hunt back in the game this week as well for the midfield, and he's probably their best tagging option. Who do you think Chris Scott will, take Taylor Hunt to?
He's done Hill in the past, I think, a couple of times. So it'll be interesting if they go then again. I don't think Daniel Pearce has really been tagged much. Fife, no one can tag Fife. Yeah, so it looks like it's really going to be Hill again.
I think it's going to be really crucial, Daniel Pearce, in this game. As you said, he hasn't been tagged a lot, and there is still probably been a few question marks about Pearce's ability to play in the big games. And obviously, this is his chance to be able to put the doubters wrong. But if he's going to be tagged by Hunt, it's really important that Pearce makes them pay the other way, so to at least make them think twice about doing that. Because between Hill and Pearce, they are our two outside runners, and we need one of them to step up and play really strong. Subin has got a bit of pace as well, to ability to break from the contest. But, we definitely need Pearce or Hill to give that extra bit of spark from the clearances there. All right, moving forward into the forward line, Geelong have got quite a tall forward or defensive setup and obviously playing together quite a while with a number of guys over that 190 centimetre mark. They've got Harry Taylor, Tom Lonergan, Corey Enright, Jimmy Bartel, Andrew Mackie and Jared Rivers. One thing they don't have is a lot of pace in the back six. So I think if we can get the ball down there quickly and push our half forwards up and even our full forwards up a little bit, the ability to get goals over the back will be crucial. And I think we've seen in games this year, some small forwards have got off the leash against Geelong, particularly the likes of Monfries. I think he kicked 7, Nash McGrath kicked 6. Walters kicked 3 last time they played. So with Walters and Ballantyne, I think it's going to be really important that we sort of get out there and try and take advantage of that pace that we do have in the forward line. Fremantle obviously will have Zach Clark. I think Sandilands will start forward myself, and Clark will start in the ruck. The Sandilands will be at full forward. Walters in the pocket along with Ballantyne. Pavlich at centre half forward, and then you've got Main and maybe Fife who's going to run through that half forward line and rotate through with De Boer or someone similar like that. So I think Fremantle have got the ability to kick a winning score against Geelong. It's just whether they get enough quick ball movement and whether they take advantage of the inside 50s that they get.
Yeah. I think looking now at this forward line, it's almost our strongest edge we're going to have over them. And the biggest thing for me, and I've actually had a look through the Geelong posters on the other board, and they've got Josh Hunt and Cam Guthrie out of the side that look like ideal candidates to take Ballantyne and Walters. So it'd be interesting to see how damaging we can actually be with those two players, Walters and Ballantyne, and make the most of hopefully a mismatch and really try and burn them off, because these guys don't like running back to goal when the ball's over their head. So it's an area we can definitely exploit them. If we've got Pavlich there, I just remember how terrible it was last time trying to kick to Hanneth, who seemed to be labouring around, and and Tabernet was still obviously learning our game plan, it's going to be great to actually have a nice forward structure and two fit players that have had weeks off. But we pretty much look at that whole forward line: Pavlich, Walters, Fife, Main, Valentine. None of those guys played last week, so.
Yeah, and
except for Pav, really. Sorry.
Yeah, and I think the Big Footy poster forum, Go the Dockers, in his write-up this week, in the excellent match preview that the different posters had given online, I think he's sort of hit the nail on the head in terms of being able to drop our eyes a little bit. And when he was talking about when we played Adelaide, we had sort of 33 inside 50s for 20 scoring shots. If we kick the ball high, Geelong love coming across loose man. Harry Taylor will just have a day out all day. We need to keep that ball low and sharp. And I think we saw that in the first game last year in the final against Geelong at the MCG, where we were just sort of pinpointing that pass inside 50, keeping it nice and short, where Pav was leading strong. And I think we just need to make sure we do that again this week. We just can't afford just to bomb the ball in there, because their defenders have just played together too long and know the game so well. Probably a bit like our defence as well. If you bomb it in there, we're just going to clean it up and send it back the other way. I think the other crucial part this week, Seppo, will be the use of the corridor. Obviously, both teams love using the corridor and ranked 1 and 2 in the league. So it'll be interesting to see who does manage to win the battle of that corridor matchup.
It's been a focal point. It's not something I've really noticed watching the game, but the one thing that it has stuck out in a couple of games I've actually personally seen from ground level is Tom Sheridan and Stephen Hill. When they get the ball anywhere within that centre square and stream forward, it's a thing of beauty. And I just hope that we actually get the space to be able to get those guys free and run that ball forward, because both of them actually have pretty good ball use, and it'll be great to see that maximised as well, with Daniel Pearce in there as well.
Yeah, you'd have to think Sheridan's going to get the emergency or the vest this week. I mean, you're not going to put Lockie Neal, Stephen Hill, or Barlow, who are on the interchange, in the vest. So you'd have to think Sheridan will get the vest for sure.
Could be Sutcliffe.
I can't see Sutcliffe getting the vest. He's going to be too valuable down back as a defender. And as I mentioned earlier, I think it's been a bit of an inspired move by the match committee in order to try and find that extra small defender. And I think his games in the last few weeks, particularly the game he played on Robbie Gray against Port, was really, really good. And I think he's developing into that role pretty well. And he's just got that ability to, if the matchups change, he can run into the midfield, which just gives us that extra flexibility, which I reckon is fantastic.
And I reckon Sutcliffe's not only worked on his skill set, but his actual body shape. He seems to be filling out. He's actually looking quite big across the shoulders, and actually look like he can actually take a good tackle and take a hit and take those Chapman, Robbie Gray style players. So it'll be actually interesting to see if he does line it there. But there's every chance that with McFarlane coming in that we do shuffle around. But hopefully between Sutcliffe, Hill, Pearce and Sheridan, we do have some runners that can use that corridor.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see who Geelong use in the vest as well. Obviously, Travis Varco has been named on the bench, and he would be that sort of impact player that could come off and really change the game quite quickly. But obviously, they've got little guys like Stokes as well who could also take the vest. You wouldn't think Taylor Hunt is going to get the vest. He'd be in that sort of tagging role, and Blickvarts is obviously going to be the second ruck. So it'd be interesting to see which way they go in terms of using the vest.
I reckon it'll be one of Varco or Caddy, really. We can't really see any other logical choices out there for them.
No, I agree. So it'll certainly be a interesting game, and obviously the last time we played them, we had probably 4 or 5 of our better players out, with Barlow in particular, Mundy in the midfield out as well. So it's going to be definitely a tough game, and it'll be an interesting environment down there. Obviously, there was a lot of hoopla about during the week in terms of the number of tickets and that sort of stuff. But as I said, when you get down there at the end of the day, it's all played on the field anyway. So it'll be certainly a tough game for the boys. But I think if they play to their best capabilities, they've got the ability to win. But I think it will be close all day.
Yeah.
All right. Any other points you want to make about the final this week, Seppo? Or
no, other than the fact that I hope everyone that is getting down there is going to put on their best for the Freo faithful and get out there, show your voice. If you come around and sit in the cheer squad in Bay 10 or 9 in the Gary Ablett Terrace, make sure you come down, say hello to me, join in when we start to cheer the boys.
Is there anything happening after the game this week, Seppo, down in Geelong?
We've got pre-game drinks at the Barwon Club Hotel, which is I think on Murrable Street, probably about a 5 or 10 minute walk from the stadium. So I think roughly between 11:30 and 12:30, there'll be a whole bunch of us down there. So if you're early to the ground, while it's safe, daylight, get down to the Barwon Club Hotel, I think it's called, just down the street. I went there early in for the round 14 game. It's a great little location, good beer garden out the back. Yeah, it should be good. Post game, depending on the result, might be wise to just move on from that area.
Fair enough too. I think one other interesting point before we move on to the next part, we'll be looking at how Fremantle's midfielders go forward, and because they rotate them quite often through the forward 50 now, with obviously Fife and Barlow in particular being able to go there and take marks. So it'd be interesting to see if they get someone like a Taylor Hunt, whether they drag them down into that forward 50, because I think it will be an area that we can exploit on them as well, particularly if they have that extra player who can rotate from the midfield through there as well, just to give us that extra marking target if we need it.
We do have many midfielders on the list now that sort of played. Subin is one that I've before penciled him as a backman, but he's spent a lot of his time in the midfield now, and it's just another one to the rotations and obviously get their rest. Some of them go forward, and some of them drop back. Like I know Hill and Mundy have had turns playing down back when it's their turn to rotate through the midfield, and that might be a key part of moving towards with the cap rotations, about just different field positions and get them out of the midfield.
Yeah, I think one thing that'll be also crucial this week is obviously man management for Fremantle, in terms of the concern. Obviously, Nick Subin went out 2 weeks ago with a tight hamstring. Obviously, if McFarlane plays coming back off a calf, it's just sometimes a little bit dangerous going in with a couple of guys under. If we lose a couple of guys early or whatever, it does make it pretty hard if you lose that rotation early. And even last week we saw with Clancy Pearce coming off, it does put you behind the eight ball if we can. So we want to make sure those guys are 100% or as close to before, if they're going to get picked to play. And I think that's probably the reason why, as you said, those extra guys like Crichton have gone over just in case, just to give us a bit of flexibility in the forward half, back half, and in the middle.
Yeah, obviously no risk policy with Johnson, knowing it was big enough and he's too important to us to rest. So it'll be interesting to see the call they make.
Yeah, obviously a bit of a concern as well when they say it'll be a 1 week injury. We've seen that happen a couple of times in the past and it sort of dragged out. So hopefully he's only a 1 week injury, and hopefully we don't even need him next week and we can have the week off and recover. All right. Also, this week there was the AFL MVP candidates came out, and Fremantle had 3 players named, and I'm pretty sure it's the first time we've ever had 3 named as candidates. So we had Ryan Crowley, who many thought was a bit stiff not to get a berth in the 40-man squad for the All-Australians. We had Nathan Fife and Michael Johnson, who not only got mentioned there, but also in the All-Australian candidates. So a terrific year for him and Fife as well.
It's great to see the representation. Obviously, the 5 players named in the All-Australian squad too, with Walters, Johnson, Main, Fife and Mundy. So unfortunately for McFarlane, obviously didn't play too many games, but while he has played, he's been in All-Australian form, and it would have been nice to see them there, but we can't have them all. And like Pavlich missed out on the All-Australian jersey last year, it's picked by amateurs, so you can't take too much stock into an All-Australian squad selection.
Yeah, I thought it's quite interesting when you look at players like McFarlane. If McFarlane missed the first 6 weeks of the season or 7 weeks of the season, but played the last 15 weeks, he probably would have got selected. But because you played the first 15 and missed the last 7, you sort of fall out of calculations. It's interesting how that momentum, when you come towards the end of the season, is crucial in terms of whether you get selected or not.
Yeah, people with short memories.
Yeah, absolutely. And I thought, it's interesting as well that Barlow, who was, I think he's on the 3rd line of betting for the Brownlow, didn't get a berth either. So, the AFL could have a bit of egg on their face there if Barlow does manage to poll well and not get a berth in the All-Australian squad. But it's going to be tough for Fremantle because I think they've got a lot of players who will take votes off each other as well. Probably a bit like Geelong had in the past. All right. So anything else you'd like to add this week, Seppo?
No, other than if no one's checked it out yet, I'm sure it's been getting a good run on our board, but the preview thread that Mattis117 has put out earlier to join everyone's little segment of preview with all the matchups and cool little stats that I dug out, and Cassius with his Freo version of Bohemian's Rhapsody is an absolute classic. So get in there, have a read of it, and probably one of the best threads I've seen on the board this year.
Excellent. Yeah, I had a bit of a look through it today, and obviously quoted a few, go the Dockers from there. And I think as you said, it will be, it's an excellent read and sort of gives you in-depth on every part of the game, including previous matchups, history, everything like that. And I think that'll be interesting to see how the teams come out in that first 5 minutes as well, Seppo, with the past history there, particularly with Ballantyne, and obviously Scarlett's retired now, but Stevie J is there's no sort of love lost between the sides, that's for sure.
There was a couple of things picked up. I think Five Speed or someone on the boards actually mentioned the points hanging over some of the Cats' heads, which we could try and get in. And like we did at the start of the Adelaide game, we instigated something right at the start to try and play on their mind. So interesting to see how the boys come out, and I'm sure they'll be fired up and right to be in their faces to make sure we get on the front foot.
Yeah. I mean, you just don't want to see them give away any silly free kicks because you'd have to think the umpires are going to be onto it pretty quickly based on past history. So you just don't want to give any silly free kicks away, or particularly 50s when goals are going to be so crucial to come by. All right. Just before we finish up today, we've got a special guest who's joined us this week in a Fremantle legend and played 202 games for Fremantle and is a life member. And this week we've got Anthony Grover joining us on the podcast, which is fantastic for him to come and do that. When you go through the interview, guys, and have a listen, obviously Anthony was terrific in answering any questions I put forward to him. It was a little bit of late notice by myself, trying to get it all organised. I'm certainly no great interviewer, so any questions in there or any faults in there are certainly not of Anthony's thing, but I hope you enjoy the listen. And I think it goes for about 20, 25 minutes, and he brings up some really interesting points. So have a listen, enjoy, and we'll speak to you when we get back from the interview. Got to Anthony Grover, who's joined us. Thanks very much for joining us, Anthony.
No worries. Thanks for having me.
First of all, congratulations on a great career. Only one of 6 players over the 200-game milestone. Terrific effort by you and at the club, considering over 20 years we've only had 6 guys get there.
Yeah. It's something that after playing my 100th, I set myself as a goal to get to the 200-game mark, and managed to do that. My second last year of footy is unfortunately I got to add one more game in the last year, but terrific moment to walk out onto the ground with my daughter in my arms for my 200th game. Eddie had it was.
Yeah, no, fantastic. And before we sort of get into your Freo one, what are you doing with yourself now that you've sort of retired from footy? Yeah,
at the moment I'm out working at the Department of Sport and Rec. I'm still in projects and digital sporting programs here, so yeah, I've been there for five months now, and it's it's been good to still be involved in the sporting industry, I guess, even though it's a government department, but I do a lot of state sporting organisations, so and very closely, obviously, with football, because with the large number of Indigenous and Aboriginal people playing, that I've formed a pretty strong relationship with them.
Yeah, and obviously, when you retired from Fremantle, you went back to Subiaco on the Waffle for a little while. How did you enjoy that?
Yeah, it was good. I mean, it was just to go back to Subiaco, and even though I knew a fair few guys, it did feel like I went to a new football club, which was probably what I needed. I needed a bit of a sea change and get away from Fremantle Oval, and unfortunately the body just packed it up, and I had a few knee problems, which I hadn't had in my whole career. Which so basically, that was me done, and I ended up having to retire after only playing a couple of games, and just live a different lifestyle.
Yeah. Do you still do anything much with Subiaco now that you've retired?
No, apart from cruising on their footy trip, that's about it.
At least you're going for the right part of the year anyway. Yeah. So what was your probably highlight as a career as a Fremantle player?
Oh, look, I'll probably mention one of them. That was, when walking out, my daughter in my arms and that. And also, it was a pretty private moment, but when my grandma passed away, she passed away the morning of a derby. I was very unsure as to whether I'd play, but I just sort of moment of clarity, and with my family around me, and I said, "Yep, I'm going to play." And I pretty much rocked up the ground, didn't even have socks on. My missus at the time, she went and packed my bag for me and come back to the hospital, and then I went straight to the Oval and went out there, and I kicked the first goal of the game from outside of 50 after Robbie Warnock handballed me the game. I just remember kissing the back arm man, and it was just an amazingly special moment for me that I cherish.
And I think it was especially for the Fremantle fans as well, because I remember that. I mean, you didn't kick a lot of them, but that one in particular, and especially in the derby. Obviously, for you being I know that we talk a lot about the time with particularly with young Indigenous kids, and I'm working in sort of education myself. Yeah. Did you find that family is really important in terms of you being able to get to that AFL level?
Yeah, it is. I mean, my grandma played a special part for me. She was I lived with her when I got drafted, so. Look, I mean, I'm just glad that my family got to enjoy the journey, and being here in WA, and they get to as many games as they could. My dad being up in Meekatharra, so when he'd come down, he'd get to the games, and there was always that. Everyone wears purple in my family. Don't worry about that.
Excellent. And obviously, a couple of years, I think it's 2 or 3 years in a row, you got selected in the Indigenous All-Stars side.
Yeah, I mean
obviously that would have been.
It was amazing. The first team we played in was probably the best team, and I can't remember, maybe 05, but we had, I mean, you know, the Berglund brothers, you know, Farmer, McLeod, Goods, Lachlan, you know, I mean, the list just keeps going on and on and on. I mean, it was an amazing turnout.
Yeah, and what do you think about having this year with the with the Australian team going to Ireland, having the Indigenous All-Stars team? Do you think that's a good idea? Or?
Oh, it's a great idea. I mean, I looked at the list and there's a bit of toe out there, and unfortunately, you know, I spoke to Michael Johnson. I know he's really keen to play. And I was thinking, what an opportunity, you know. It's a shame it wasn't around 10 years ago, but I think it's a good direction to head. I mean, people talk about it, you know, like it's, I guess that used to be the All Australians that were picked, and basically it wasn't. They weren't getting the numbers, and they're trying to go for a bit more specific type of players. And yeah, I think the Indigenous boys will encapsulate that.
I think it's a perfect sort of game for them as well, with their speed and agility and the ability to move.
I'll take more interest in it, to be honest.
Yeah.
You know, I'd want to watch it because I never really worried about it too much. But
yeah,
knowing that, the boys going to be out there, it'll be interesting to see how.
Yeah. As you said, I think it'll certainly add a little bit more flair to it than what it's probably been in the past. I don't think with the All Australian team they necessarily suited that game, particularly some of the bigger guys. So I think it'll be better. Did you, as a Fremantle player, obviously towards the end of your career, they did experiment with you playing down full forward a little bit. Yeah. Did you prefer playing forward or back in your time?
Oh, well, I mean, I loved the challenge. I didn't get a whole lot of opportunities because basically we've always been reasonably stacked up forward, I'd say. You know, I spent pretty much the whole year at Subi this year playing forward, training in the games I played up forward. So I kicked a few goals and that, and actually kicked 4 in my last game against East Fremantle, which is the most I'd ever kicked. So, been a waffle game, but look, I mean, I enjoyed the challenge. I kicked a couple of goals, but at the end of the day, I mean, I had my niche down in the back line, and the guys I played with, I think we had a really good understanding. The guys that had been around for a long time, so we really had our own little combination working.
And who was probably most people would probably say Pavlich, but would he be, or was he the best player you played with, or do you think there was someone else in your side who you thought was, you know, probably the best player you played with in that Fremantle side over the time?
I mean, yeah, I guess purely on consistency and over longevity, Pav would be up there, but you know, I don't really like singling players out too much. I mean, there's a lot of like Luke McFarlane, I mean, you know, Peter Bell, Jeff Farmer, you know, like there's some bloody good players that I've played with, you know, and yeah, it's just, I mean, in 10 years' time, I'll be looking at, you know, Nate Fife or, you know, who knows, like maybe Sun could be anything, you know, like you know, top 40 or for the All Australian, you know. So Ballas, you know, if they go on to win premierships, anything's possible.
Absolutely. No, and who was probably the best player you played against? I mean, obviously you played against some terrific full forwards in your time. Who was probably, you know, the best player you played on? Well,
yeah, I had short bursts on blokes like Jonathan Brown, Rewalt, and Matthew Richardson, you know. But these guys have got massive tanks, and they're bloody tall, you know. So compared to me, so I found them probably the hardest players to play on. And then I've played on Stephen Milne and Sirioli in my last couple of years, and you know, just to go from change from that sort of from one player to the next, from a tall to a small. I mean, they are the extreme challenges for me, and So I don't think it's a single about one player. I just think I'm pretty grateful that I got to spend time playing on some bloody good players.
I know as a Fremantle member, like watching a lot of the games, you know, obviously your versatility was, you know, right up there, and you could obviously be able to play on talls and smalls. And I mean, I think one of the things that probably endeared you to Fremantle members was the fact that every time you played out there, it looked like you left nothing on the park. You know, it was always, you know, full on. And more often than not, it looked like you're sort of sometimes battling out of your either height range or weight range. You know, other guys were a little bit heavier, a little bit taller, and you're always sort of giving your all in the side. And, you know, I think, as you said, it probably sort of skills to your testament to being able to play on those talls and smalls.
Yeah, I think that's a competitive attitude that comes out. You don't like to be beaten, and you know, I think that's, you know, I like to think I wear my heart on my sleeve, and that's part of the person I am. So, you know, maybe if I didn't have that competitive nature, actually, if I didn't have that competitive nature, I wouldn't have succeeded at all at AFL level. Yeah.
And who was the? Do you still attend Fremantle games now when you're obviously not doing other things? Or?
Oh, look, I've been to probably 3 or 4 games this year, and I mean it's becomes got a bit more time to myself. You know, and honestly, I don't really like sitting in the stands too much. I prefer to be in a function or a box.
Why wouldn't you?
It's just a different scenario. You know, it's just different. I mean, I'm looking forward to when the new stadium gets built.
Yeah.
You know, like Subiaco's run down and that, and so hopefully when this new stadium gets built, they can put a beautiful past players room there or something.
Yeah, no, it would be good. Who was probably the best coach you had in your footy career?
Ross Lyon, he was the best coach. Even in that short space of time, I pretty much sat there for a year and learned his game plan, and I still can pick up little adjustments I may have made this year. Understanding the game plan, but I would never take anything away from the influence that Mark Harvey had on my career. As an assistant to me, he was, by far, had the greatest influence on me, and also Chris Scott, and they've proved that they can all coach at AFL level.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and there's obviously a lot of talk when Chris Scott was the defensive coach at Fremantle, obviously the impact that he had on you guys down there.
Yeah.
So do you still keep in contact with those sort of guys? Or?
Look, if we see each other around, we'll spend time having a good conversation. But I mean, obviously most of they're over east and I'm over here.
Yeah. But, so what do you reckon was the biggest difference when Ross Lyon joined the club? Obviously you were there for your last season. What did you notice was probably the biggest difference between obviously when Harvey was coaching, maybe when Ross Lyon took over?
I just think the group they've gone to another level, fitness wise, and just really understand their roles and so on. And the group has grown, and they've matured. Some of these younger players, so it's a bit of part of the evolution. I think with Haas, we were heading in the right direction. I think I just think that Ross is. I mean, it's just at the end of the day, Ross is there, so but he's getting the job done.
Yeah, and probably from when you first started the club, which I think was in '99.
Yeah.
Yeah. What's been the biggest sort of change you've noticed in either the culture of the club or the club itself from when you started until probably when you finished?
No, the professionalism first and foremost. I mean, within the club and within the whole competition. But I think there was one welfare manager, and then there was an assistant coach, and that's all I dealt with, an assistant coach. Now we have 3 or 4 development coaches, and maybe there's an extra assistant or 2, and psychologists. The player welfare is very important, and it's held in high regard by the Players Association. So, yeah.
Yeah, and do you have any sort of ambitions to go into coaching yourself down the track? Or?
Look, it's going to depend on a lot of working situation and so on. I want to. It's just a matter of if my lifestyle and what I'm doing in life fits. But I have had a little bit of a dabble in it, and it's basically I've got a trade here that's sitting in my back pocket as a footballer, and I like to share my experiences and educate the younger kids coming through.
Yeah, absolutely. There was a fair bit of debate this week about the game being transferred from either Etihad or MCG down to Simmons.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously, as fans sort of jump up and down, but as a player, does it really make any difference to you guys when you think about it? Or would it, if you were in that situation, obviously being there in the past, would it have made a difference to you? Or is it just, you just prepare
it for a moment, but then it's like anything, you just got to focus on the game. And, personally, it's a joke to me that they're playing down there. But, the way the club's handled it, especially Ross and the way Pav spoke, I think last night, the night before, first class, and the focus is to get the job done, and anywhere, anytime.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a really good thing. In the past, I think Fremantle sometimes have found ways to sort of have excuses or not tolerate that sort of thing. Where, as you said, that anytime, anywhere mantra seems to have really rubbed off on the players as well. They sort of always come out with that belief, which is at
the same time, I don't think behind closed doors there will be a few people in administration that wouldn't be too happy with the decision.
No, absolutely,
which is fair enough.
Just speaking of that, obviously there's not many. I don't think there hasn't been any WA player, whether West Coast or Fremantle, who's made 300 games. What was the impact on travel like for you as a player? Did it have a real big impact on the way you?
I think it does, but you just do it, and I think for me it's probably the impact I've seen is when guys were either recruited over to the club or I remember Harves, as a coach, an assistant coach, how have you blokes done this every second week? And this is part and parcel of the job. You don't know no different, and it's you even You know, I used to get bored on the plane. Now, you got iPads, laptops, they consume you, and it's an opportunity to, on the way over, you can review some of the opposition, and you build a very strong friendships within the club, and you spend a lot of time together.
Yeah. Do they so do the coaches, when you fly over on those sort of flights, do they spend a bit of time doing like work, or is it generally chill time or just relaxing time?
I'd say it's up to the individual, but everyone's got their own routine, and leading into a game, you want to, if you want to be a successful AFL footballer, you would have done some research on the opposition.
Yeah, absolutely. The other one is did you as a player have any regrets or anything that you had throughout your career? Was there anything you think, I wish I did this or I wish I did that, or?
No, look, I'm pretty, regrets. I mean, I'm not necessarily regrets, there's always things that you could have done a little different, but I wouldn't call them regrets. And then, I mean, it's just, I come out of it. I now know my body hasn't got no more to give. It's interesting. People on the street, are you disappointed that you're not out there and you're not playing? Will you be pissed off if the boys go the way and you're not out there? I said, nah. I said, I'll be the first one down there celebrating. And, it would be a magical moment. And, my body's shut up shop. I can't play no more. And unfortunately, we've had a little bit of a dabble in finals. But, I'm just hoping the boys can, whether they're successful or not this year, that it's sustained. Yeah. And it's built over a few years and a few more opportunities in the top 2, top 4.
Yeah, and I think you said the club looks like it's going on that sort of track, which is fantastic. Did you ever have any time in your career where you thought maybe, or whether the team approached you, or as to change clubs, or you traded, or recruited, or?
When I had Chris Connolly, I was pretty much cleaned my locker out the door just about. I was going to go to the Kangaroos, and it was. Then the deal sort of maybe fell through a little bit, and lucky enough they offered me a deal and I ended up staying. But I was pretty much gone, and I mean, it was a tough situation then, because I didn't think the coach had the confidence in me that he'd previously given to me. So, but in saying that, you got to be careful now, when it comes. Well, back then especially, because the clubs had a lot more control over you, but. To walk away from a contract and not be set in stone that you got another one, it can be risky business.
Yeah, absolutely.
But now with the what's it called again, the
free agency.
I think it's great from my point of view. To see Quentin Lynch go to another club at the age of 30. I was like, football's heading in the right direction for the players.
So do you reckon if in that time free agency was in place, you would have definitely gone to the Kangaroos, you think?
I don't know.
Or you may not definitely, but you would have considered a little bit more?
I'm not too sure.
Yeah.
I'm not too sure, but, once you get to the age of 30, the club's got a lot of control over you.
Yeah.
Because you can't really, what are you going to get, 1-year deals and pay cuts, basically, for most of the guys. But.
Yeah, and I mean, and that's where it is now. I think, you said it's that professionalism is not just off the field. I think it's on the field, and as you said, it's more of maybe a business for guys now when you've only got limited time, because clubs are really... if you have a bad year, they're willing to chop you pretty quick. Yeah. And likewise, if you have a good year, then other teams are doing it. So, how do you think Fremantle, obviously this year being in the top 4, they've got a chance to go to Geelong. How do you think they'll perform in the finals this year?
Yeah, look, I mean, you wouldn't want to be coming up against Fremantle. That's what I'd say. I mean, you know what the team's going to bring, and it's a very important game this week, Geelong. So, just get over this one, and anything's possible, and it'd be nice to have a home prelim final. And I think that there's 4 teams in the top 4. Yeah, that are looking to get a home prelim.
As you said, the tight guys, if they can get over the top of that line, getting that home prelim will be such a big event.
There's no doubt that Collingwood and Richmond, there's some quality teams underneath, so it'd be ideal to get that week off and get that break under the prelim.
I think that's the big thing as well with Fremantle now, is when I looked before, even when I went back and looked at that prelim side that you guys played in Sydney, your first 15, 16 guys are pretty good, but after the bottom 6 were probably just a little bit weaker than Sydney at the time. Yeah, okay. Where I think now, I reckon Fremantle really bat a lot deeper, and even trying to find guys who are going to miss a game this week is really tough, when you go through and have a look at the side.
Yeah, well, the selection would be quite interesting. Unfortunately, Clancy Pearce is out, and Everton Ibo's going to miss out by the looks of it. So, and Luke McFarlane's should come back, and I mean, they've been a steady part of the defence for the first 15 rounds, and unfortunately, a few little hiccups.
Yeah, and I think it's probably hard to go in more than one injured player. I suppose, well, one player under an injury cloud in that sort of game, if you bring in Luke, it's probably hard to go with Ibo as well. Because if you go one player down, especially with only 3 on the bench.
Yeah, well, I think that Luke will play. Yeah, unfortunately, you have injuries in football, and that's the way it goes.
Yeah, absolutely. And it was terrific, obviously, to see 5 Dockers get recognised in the All-Australian squad this year. Yeah. And probably some would argue that probably Luke would have been a shoo-in until he got injured, and probably Barlow was probably been unlucky to miss out as well.
Luke, Ballers and Mickey Barlow. So no doubt that they were probably on the cusp and would have been brought up, in the discussion. But look, I'd like to think that Michael Johnson will get a role and get his first All-Australian selection, and I think he's and the people even mentioned Crowds, possibly. So, yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, as you said, there was quite a bit of talk even on the East Coast about Crowley probably deserving a jumper, and and he'd probably be a pretty good chance to go back to back even in the Doig medal. The other sort of I suppose, just a more question probably about obviously your family was, particularly your wife, was really supportive of you through your football. How important is it to have as an AFL player, just to have that, whether you be wife, partner, or just having that support all the time, considering how intense the football is these days?
Yeah, I guess it's just football consumes you, and basically it's all you worry about in life, you can forget about what life's really about sometimes when your only sole focus is it. But it's good to get away now and just realise there can be a lot more to life, and so I'm enjoying retirement, but it's I still. I knew at the end of football I was done, but I look back with great appreciation for my time in the system.
Well, obviously you had a daughter when you came out for your home. Is it still just your daughter?
No, I got a little girl. She's 3.5, and the little boy is 21 months. So they're good fun, And,
so potential father-son there.
Potential, yeah. You're going to be a little unit, I think. So
I'm sure if we could get another one out there as well. Do you still keep in contact with many of the current players? Obviously, you just
Kevin Bradley, Michael Johnson. A few blokes these days with social media, it's a lot easier to keep in contact with, and all these Snapchatting and Facebook and
Twitter and whatnot.
So you keep in close check. I've got a few boys, Roger Hayden, and Stephen Dodd, and Des Edlin, so boys. Cookie just rang me, actually, as a missed call there.
Oh, okay.
No, it's all good. But, I mean, at the end of the day, you don't walk away from a football club being best friends with 46 blokes and talking to them every day, but you do form some really strong bonds that, are lifelong bonds. Yeah.
And particularly, I suppose, those guys in defence, because, I mean, obviously watching you and Roger Hayden, Roger was obviously a crowd favourite at the time, and obviously between you, Luke, and those sort of guys, in defence.
Oh, we're pretty good. Pretty strong understanding of each other and that, but I mean the club's doing some really good things too moving forward for guys that are life members. We had a function or a luncheon a couple of weeks ago, and that was good to see. Shane Parker and Belly, and brings us all together, including the present day players. A few of us had a few drinks. The good guys that were playing weren't, so there's a difference in that.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the things I've noticed with the club is they are trying to sort of do that, sort of bring back the those type of things, and even as you said, the professionalism. I think in the past when we looked at obviously when Ross Lyon was appointed, it was obviously a shock to not only the journalists and the people around the town. Was it a shock to the players as well? And
it was. I mean, we got a call or message sent a half an hour before there was a media release. So there you go.
Yeah, I mean, especially when you compare to the old days when Damien Drum was replaced and he sort of came in the car park and all the media was sort of knew before he did. I think it was certainly, although it was not probably an ideal way to do either situation, I think it certainly shows how far the club's come in its professionalism in terms of being able to do it without media input.
We had no idea. So that's basically how it went.
Yeah. All right. Well, thanks very much for joining us, Anthony. Is there what do you think just before we go, if you can give us a tip for this week, how do you reckon the boys will go?
I'll give them 8 points.
8 points?
Yeah.
Excellent. All right. Thanks for joining us. We really appreciate it, and I said we'll look forward to catching you in the future.
Thanks for having me, and go Freo.
Absolutely. Cheers. Right. Thanks very much for joining us, Anthony. I hope the listeners out there enjoyed the interview, and over the course of the next season, we're going to try and bring on some other old Fremantle players to have a listen to. Obviously, Anthony, in our interview, tipped Fremantle by 8 points. Seppo, what do you think the result will be this week?
I think it's going to be close as well. 15 points to Freo, but neck and neck all game. I think it's going to be a nice tight contest.
I think it'll be under 2 goals myself as well in the final contest. I know the line this week's 19.5 points. Obviously, I think if one team gets away to a big lead, whichever direction it goes, teams may put the queue in the rack waiting for next week. But I think it'll go right down to the wire, and I think Fremantle, on their best day, have the ability to win the game. It's going to be really, really tight. I mean, obviously Geelong have won 51 out of 52 or whatever it is out there. Now, obviously, they haven't played a lot of the top 4 sides in that time, but it's still quite an imposing record. But I think Fremantle at their best can get in, and I'm going to say we'll get up by 5 points. All right, that's it for this week. Thanks for listening in, guys. It's obviously been a bit longer this week, having the Grover interview and obviously the in-depth finals preview, but I hope you've enjoyed it, and we'll catch you again next week. Thanks for joining us again, Seppo.
No worries, and hopefully we'll have a week off of footy next week, and we'll be talking about a prelim.
Absolutely. Thanks for joining us again, guys. If you haven't already done so, you can download the podcast from iTunes or subscribe there. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you again next week. Bye for now.